Hey everyone, Sumo Spiffy here. Welcome to the Broken Ozeki Basho, where we've set aside several videos worth of prep for a later date and started the search for new and interesting matches to discuss. And one of the most interesting, at least in terms of the competitors, is Gonoyama vs Shonannoumi. Gonoyama hasn't hit the popularity levels of Hakuoho or even Hokuseiho, but he did achieve some notoriety for barnstorming Juryo in May and denying then Ochiai a Yusho despite a 14-1 record. He's not exactly a villain, but more of a mysterious rival to the young protege. Of course, if Gonoyama's flown under the radar, Shonannoumi's popularity hasn't even left the ground. And it's easy enough to understand when you look at their records side by side. Gonoyama's blown through the pro ranks in just a couple of years since debuting at the bottom of Sandanme in 2021, whereas Shona's been around for nearly a decade. But here's a pretty important detail when assessing their future prospects. They're only 1 day apart in age. Gano fought an amateur for a long time, which is how he got his head start once he went pro, whereas Shona joined the Maizumo beginner ranks just before his 16th birthday. He staggered through Makushita for 6 years, but if you look at his recent history, he appeared to turn a corner in Nagoya here 1 year ago. Gano, on the other hand, blitzed his way to Juryo, but stumbled a bit in the second division before hitting his stride. Still, given Gonoyama's 3-1 advantage over Shonannoumi and his utterly dominant Juryo run in May compared to Shona's mere 11-4 campaign, it's hard to argue against him being the better fighter with the higher ceiling. But is he dominant to the point of Shona's efforts against him being hopeless, or has Shonannoumi shown enough in their matches that he might be able to turn them into victories going forward? Let's check it out. Gonoyama buries himself into Shonannoumi's chest on the tachiai and uses his leverage from below and Shona's slight lack of balance to land a strong push. Shona doesn't go very far before catching his balance, and when Gano pulls his left arm back to avoid it being used against him, Shona uses his significant advantage in height and length to reach out and trap Gano's wrist while pushing up around the head. Gano gets caught by this while stepping forward, which sends him way off to his right and in a significantly compromised position. Gonoyama does a pretty good job recovering his arm control, then his balance, but each movement gives Shona another moment to push and encroach. When Shona leans in further, Gano uses his right hand to keep Shona's head back and weight somewhat off him. He tries to go around Shona's left arm for a push, but Shona's length again pays great dividends as he's able to shove Gano's head back, then step away from the continued push attempt while maintaining head control. He can't quite force Gano to follow him directly though. His hand slips off to the shoulder and Gonoyama recovers his balance to face Shona again directly. Gano has a strong pushing right on Shona's chest while Shona attacks Gano's left arm to prevent it from pushing as well. Shona parries the right hand off, stepping back and slightly left as Gano gives chase. But then Shonannoumi crosses him over, or does Sumo's closest equivalent to it. He shifts back to the right, stepping back past Gonoyama to control the head and push it in the direction Gonoyama is already moving, then he gets his hand on the back to complete the Hatakekomi. It's an absurd move, and it's hard to blame Gano for falling for something that, even as a pro sumo wrestler, he probably hadn't seen a 6'4", 400-pound dude pull off before. There's not much to see here, but it can be instructive as to why these matches are often so quick. Gonoyama gets inside on Shonannoumi again, and arguably has a less effective tachiai than last time, given that Shona barely moves and doesn't get off balance at all. However, Shona really only has one good chance to defend himself. He immediately tries to get Gano's right hand off his neck, but either slips or Gano's grip is too strong. From there, he shifts right, but Gano is covering that angle with his movement, and by keeping his left hand to the outside of Shona's ribs, and once Shona is at the hay with Gano actively pushing, his length doesn't matter anymore. This shows how, like any other sport, one mistake at the highest levels often means you've lost. Also, Gano is really good at full-on forward sumo. I realize I'm setting a high bar by saying this, but he could end up more like Takakeisho than Takakeisho. It really depends on how many guys in MAKUUCHI are able to absorb his attack and turn it on him consistently. Shonannoumi gets his left arm inside on the tachiai again, which in theory is smart because it limits Gonoyama's ability to push with that hand. Problem is, not only is it still a strong hand, but he has a whole other hand to work with, and Shona just can't stop Gano from sending him back right off the start. Shona runs out of space before he can start an effective pushdown, although it's worth noting just how much push he was able to get, and how Gonoyama so easily frog hopped in to roll with it. This one I had to watch a few times to realize what happened. Shonannoumi comes in much lower on the tachi to prevent Gonoyama from drilling him backwards yet again, and it works quite well. He has Gonoyama's right arm clamped, and you can see from Gano's fingers here that he has his left hand on Shona's ribs. This looks like a very balanced position. Then Gano takes a little hop step to the left, grips Shona by the meat, don't be filthy, and once he gets Shona moving, shifts the pull to the forearm and pushes with the left hand under the arm to get him down. This was a great move by Gonoyama, not shifting his feet any further than he needed to. Shonannoumi needs to notice things like this and adjust his foot placement accordingly, so the fact this worked is at least partly on his failure to defend, but Gano did a really good job of masking his tactic until he unleashed it. So what can we take from all this? Number one, Gonoyama's really good. Whether he and his coaches devised the thrust down in the last fight ahead of time for what they thought Shona might do for a moment like that in general, or if he's just got that in the back of his sash should the fight call for it, Gano's got moves other than bulldozing kids into the clay. For Shona, after their first 3 fights, it looked like he had the capacity to fight back as long as he was able to stay off the Tawara and give himself a chance to use his length advantage. But he did that in the last one and it was instantly turned on him anyway. Now, he has the physical tools to at least challenge Gonoyama if he can find and adopt a good strategy, but what would that be? He's listed as a Yotsu and Oshi fighter, but most of his wins come with techniques that don't involve the belt. Not only that, the ones that do are usually Kiri, which would generally mean moving Gonoyama backwards, and that doesn't seem likely to happen either. He might need to try taking a page out of Hokuseiho's book and lean on the Tawara with a belt grip to keep from being pushed out, but if that's not a natural fighting position for him, he might be generally doomed until Gano fights someone like Terunofuji or Asanoyama and they give a guy like Shona some ideas for what to do. Alright, that's it for this breakdown. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.